How do you make a deep and meaningful conversation more sci-fi? I believe in the power of conversational podcasting. I love its ability to demystify big ideas and powerful concepts and achievements seemingly limited to a lucky and privileged few. It can make the unattainable seem human. Podcasting definitely has a place in this upcoming 6-month mission. I'm looking forward to bringing more conversations as part of this YouTube channel, specifically as a way of doing a little bit more long-form content in between these shorter episodes. But I've been using it of late to try and fix my own situation. I have been creating out of curiosity, yes, but also in a way out of a place of fear. Can I create a podcast that balances meaning with fun? How can I incorporate my love of sleek futures and cool machines into chats about getting things done? Hello and welcome. I am Rob Farker, a 40-something lover of sleek futures and cool machines who's taking his personality and perspective to YouTube to talk about life, the universe and everything, and how to do them all with intent. A quick note at the top of this episode, as always, I would love it if you could like this video, subscribe to this channel, and ideally pen a polite, enthusiastic, and constructive comment below. It would be great not just to read you and what you're getting out of this channel, but your interest lets YouTube know that this channel is worth promoting, and it can lead to my improving the quality of these videos. So, podcasting has been around for, probably a couple of decades now as of 2024, yet in some ways it still feels like its infancy. I mean, it seems an odd thing to say, given that broadcasting is only, maybe a century or two old? I apologise to those of you out there who are media wonks and who are screaming at their screens right now as I say this, but it does feel like it has a lot of a way to go yet. One thing I did want to note is that it's more a medium than a genre, the same way that anime, as much as we toss it around, is kind of a medium rather than a specific genre of storytelling. It's a way of conveying content to an audience rather than a specific type of content. It encompasses all kinds of things from documentaries and all you true crime serial killer girlies out there. You. And of course, it's one of the wonderful things it's done is help to resurrect the venerable audio drama. I've never heard Welcome to Night Vale myself, but I know that it is or at least was until recently, again, a little bit outside my wheelhouse. It might still be a big deal, so I don't mean to cast shade on it or anything like that. I have been into podcasting since the late noughties. I can't exactly remember how I discovered it. I suspect it was due to my getting my mitts on one of these. Let's see if I can hold it a bit closer to the screen. An iPod Nano. A step-granddaughter of mine was living with us for a while, and this was hers, and she managed to put a bit of a dent down the bottom of it, which didn't really hinder its functioning as an iPod at all, but still, I decided to get her a new one in her preferred colour of green if she would give me this one. I do miss those old iPods. They were really fit for purpose. If you wanted to listen to music or listen to podcasts, it was a bit of a pain actually having to download new content onto them via iTunes and manage them that way, but still, there was just something so natural and easy about using this lovely jog shuffle dial to get at your content and turn the volume up or down and play and pause. It's something that modern appliances such as this can't just do quite as well, because you've got to unlock the screen and look at the screen, whereas this you could do basic stuff without even looking at it. You could just, have your hand in your pocket constantly. Don't mind me. No, it is an iPod in my pocket. I'm not happy to see you. Yeah, I think it was through that I discovered podcasting. I can't exactly remember what my first podcast was, but I do remember listening to Mer Lafferty's fantastic I Should Be Writing, which I believe she is still doing and has even turned into a Twitch stream as well. I decided to give it a go from memory in 2012. At the time, my website was called Get Writing Rob Farker, and I decided to create a podcast that was called Get Talking Rob Farker, just for the purposes of getting me to do the thing and try it out. And I think I was doing a little bit of audio logging as well as recording some fiction that I'd been writing at the time, narrating my own stuff. Then one day I was talking with a friend whom I met at Macquarie University back in the late 90s when I did my 1 year there before I failed out, Marcus. And he was telling me about how he was using his business hosting people's websites to basically pay for his entire life and fund him going back to TAFE to do some more study. And the idea occurred to me, I've got to talk to this guy for an episode of my show. So we queued up a time and we basically talked about his life and his career and his business. And it was at that moment I thought, I have a concept for my show. Because it was something that I kind of wanted to explore doing. How could I take something that I enjoyed and make some money out of it, either as a sideline or replacing my full-time gig? And hence what was called the Paid to Play podcast was born. And it went for 123 episodes, a lovely number, easy to remember, from 2012 to 2017. I wound up winding it up after that time for a few reasons. At the time, I was married. My late wife was starting to get into the sharper end of the health issues that she'd been experiencing for a decade. And I found that all the work involved in sourcing guests, scheduling them, recording the episodes, editing the episodes, uploading the episodes to a website, and then doing all of the promotion necessary was getting a bit much. I needed some more immediate and regular social connection just to, help me bear the load of what was going on. And I also kind of felt that after 123 episodes, I wasn't really walking the talk of my own show. I was interviewing all these people, but I was still doing my day job. The podcast itself wasn't really a money earner. I hadn't figured out really how to, any kind of strategy for building enough of an audience that it would be worth monetizing one way or another. And of course, with everything else going on, I wasn't really interested in putting the work in to do it. So I wound it up, and for a little while, I did wind up trying to do a role-playing game actual play podcast. Again, I've been in the role-playing game hobby since the early 90s. I have to thank Jake and Cameron. I can't remember which of them it was who got the classic Red Box Dungeons and Dragons Set 1 basic rules, but it was them who actually introduced me. Well, we kind of introduced ourselves to the hobby of role-playing games because none of us had done it before, and we just had this box and we thought, all right, how does it work? This looks interesting. How do we do it? And that went for about 12 episodes. Again, it is completely not online. I did have a website for it and some theming and some content, but I took it down after a bit, and I think I've got the episodes tucked away somewhere on a hard drive, but they are definitely not online. Then my third podcasting effort was actually my first freelance effort in podcasting. One of my players for Only in Death is my mate Scott in Canada, who runs a podcast production company called Crimson Sales Media, although at the time it was Podcast Bay Productions. He had his own show to help promote the podcast, and in the fourth or fifth iteration of it, he'd shut it down before, and he wanted to bring it back, but he'd realised that he didn't want to be the person who hosted it. And so he got in touch, and he'd been talking for ages about trying to work out a way of paying me to do some work for him. And he decided that I would be the host for his show, and we agreed on a rate. And for a while, we were doing 2 episodes a month, and I was talking with podcasters about their shows and how they went about putting them together and promoting them. It was a little bit of market research for Scott, so that he could kind of get an idea about the pain points that people were experiencing and how Podcast Bay Productions could help people fix them. That went for a little under 60 episodes, I believe, and around about, that was 2021 to 2023. So we wound that up in the year that I finally packed up and moved out of Cairns and moved down to Sydney. We kind of both hit that point at around about the same time when Scott got in touch and said, look, I think it needs to wind down. It's not really serving my business anymore. I was kind of like, yeah, I'm sort of feeling like it's about the time to wrap it up for me as well. So a lot of people told me in the meantime, as I was doing bits and pieces and working on selling the house that Vicky and I had in Cairns and working out what was next, and then the opportunity to move down to Sydney came along, folks would still tell me, hey, you've got to do another podcast sometime. And I would reply that, the knee-jerk was, oh, God, no. But then I would at least refine the reply a little bit and say, maybe, but only if I have an idea that grabs me and won't let me go. At the end of July this year, 2024, an idea that powerful did. I was looking at my own life and the idea, as I've said in a few episodes already, that as much as I'm doing okay now, I need to be doing better financially in the near term so that my long-term financial security is, more secure. It combined with this whole recognition that I guess this is midlife crisis territory for me. And the thought that I can't be the only person going through this stuff at the moment. So the idea of what became the Equal First podcast was that idea. The idea of talking with people who are in my circumstances, and ideally people who are a couple of steps ahead of me, who could give me advice and be examples of the things that I could be doing to change my circumstances, and maybe also connect with people whose businesses it was, helping people like me change things around as a way of networking for myself, and also hopefully helping other people in my situation out, building an audience that way. I wound up getting 6 episodes in the can, but as I went, there were a couple of things that I started realizing. The idea for my show, it felt too broad. I was getting guests on that I just wasn't 100% sure that, I hate talking about vibes at times, you know what I mean? But it just didn't feel like the connection was 100% there. I knew sort of why I had them on, but they weren't necessarily hell yeses of guests. And I'm kind of getting to this point where I'm really realizing the value of saying, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And I also noticed as I started talking to guests, I started making the show have a little bit more of a sci-fi flavor. I started basing the questions that I was asking them around the 3 big questions from Babylon 5. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? Then with a throw in at the end of the one that was asked in the very last episode of the show, where are you going? Instead of kind of sneak it in, I need the show to be a bit more about that. I want to have a clearer idea of what the show is, and I also want to have a bit more fun with it, bring a bit more of my personality and upfronting that so that I'm more likely to get the people who are on my wavelength as audience members. Way back in the day, as part of the Pay to Play podcast, I chatted with a fella by the name of Tim. I can't remember his last name, but he has a podcast called Small Business, Big Marketing. And one of his things was that we all stand on top of a mountain of knowledge. It's just seeing that mountain and digging out the bits of it that are going to be of value to other people and refining them and working out how to help people with that knowledge. I also wound up speaking with a fella by the name of James Allen, and we actually chatted for his show called Profit Your Knowledge about how to make a bingeable podcast. And it was like, that again, that feeling like maybe I wasn't quite walking my talk in the stuff that I was talking about with him. Although one thing I did as a result of that is that James and I had a bit of a discovery call, because part of his business is helping people, more specifically in the coaching arena, start and build businesses of their own. So I thought, well, this is something that I am curious about. It'd be good to have a bit of a chat with him about it. And one of the things that I have loved for years and years is processes. Let's face it, it's probably one of the reasons why I love the RPG hobby so much, why I've got the Pathfinder 2nd edition rule books up on my shelf, even though I'm probably never going to play it, just because I love the way that the rule set hangs together. Within the last couple of weeks, I think, I pulled a book off my secondary RPG shelf, the one that's all the printouts and bound together stuff instead of the main shelf, which is the actual physical bought softcover and hardcover books. This one, Octane, Premium Unleaded. This printout, I'm sure, is at least 20 years old. I mean, where is the signature? I met at one point the guy who wrote it, Jared A. Sorensen, the guy who also put out, pardon me, going back to this is the shelf I'm talking about, the printout shelf. Here we go. The guy who also wrote Inspectors, the closest thing to a Ghostbusters role-playing game since Ghostbusters the role-playing game came out in, I think, the late 80s. Anyway, I wound up pulling this off my shelf because, you know, it's a small printout and I love the roughness and dog-earedness of it. And as I was saying, Jared was out here in the early 2000s and I was lucky enough to meet up with him and have a chat with him. And he signed my copy of Octane as well as my copy of Inspectors. Not that these I'm going to sell them or anything. They have too much sentimental value. And, you know, much as I hate to say, Jared, if you're watching, sorry, mate, but I get the sneaking suspicion a signed copy, a Jared A. Sorensen signature on something might not give all that much extra value. You never know. There might be some hardcore collectors out there who might pay a bit for it. But anyway, the point being, if you'll forgive the tangent, is that I started thinking about running it again, and I wound up digging out an old process document that I had back in the day for Octane so that I could work out how the system worked and present it to people so they understood it. And I wound up rewriting the thing as a one-pager for players, if you can see that there. And also I wound up writing up a game moderator document summary, mainly for me, just so that I can remember some key things about the game when I'm running it. But this idea of processes is a fun thing. I've done these summaries for many role-playing games over the years, and I figure I can take this love of systematizing things and getting things out of repeatable stuff out of head and onto paper to help people be able to do them quickly and easily. So I think that this show does definitely have a place on the 6-month mission, and I want to try and mash up my love of sci-fi and my love of processes. I don't have a name for the show yet, but, you know, I do have a few people in mind that I would love to talk to. There are a few folks even from the pay-to-play podcast days that I reckon I could get back on the show. Someone like Fon Davis of Fonco Studios, the digital and practical effects shop. I believe in California, I believe in LA, pretty sure it's in LA, and it's in that all broader community, and through him I wound up speaking with a couple of other LA folks, including Kimmy of Happy Jack's RPG podcast, who was putting the Starscape role-playing game out, so hence I ought to get her on the show as well. At some point I was trying like heck to get her on Podcast Bay to talk about Happy Jacks, but we could just never make a time work, so fingers crossed we can do it. But anyway, I think talking with these folks will help me build my profile as someone who loves processes and can help people get their own repeatable processes straightened out and organised, especially in terms of companies. There's that lovely business-to-business angle that I think I've always been kind of looking for. And I guess what I want out of this show is I want it to be able to scratch my conversation itch. I do dig talking to this camera and presenting ideas to you folks watching on YouTube, but I also like being able to talk to people and present that kind of content. And yeah, I do want to, like I say, get sci-fi themed guests who can talk about the regular repeatables of what they want to do. I have been slowly putting out those episodes that I recorded for Equal First because I still think they have a lot of value. I've set up a separate playlist called the Equal First Project. I was thinking of topping and tailing a bit of an intro and outro and saying, you know, this is a podcast on hiatus, but I've just been putting the darn things up anyway. I've done enough work on these things already, so let's just put them out as they are. But yes, I am looking forward to getting this going as part of the 6-month mission. I don't know whether I will start putting feelers out and sourcing guests in the current month, which is December, or whether I'll just try and work on a cool name for the damn show and try and refine the pitch so that I can get guests and maybe start working on that early in the new year, because let's face it, it's December, Christmas is coming up, everyone's attention is going to be occupied with that for the next little while, and hopefully by the time that New Year's is out of the way, everyone will be coming into January with a bit more of a clean slate and more opportunities for me to get in touch and say, hey, I've got a podcast, care to come and chat with me for it? Anyway, as we wrap this up, I would like to remind you folks again, if you haven't already, give this video a like, please subscribe to the channel. I very much appreciate your interest, and until the next episode, have a good time in the meantime. This is Rob Farker, signing off.